Hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 183. So glad you could join me. Abby E. Murray is here. She's our main guest tonight. I've been excited for this one for a long time. It's going to be a great episode. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this. We love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click the like button and share, subscribe, rate reviews on iTunes and Spotify and anything else, wherever else this is. You're listening to this right now. Leave some kind of feedback because that's how poetry spreads around the internet, and that's what we're always trying to do. Now, you might be surprised to see me at the office based on last week's critique of the week. I've been shoveling for 6 hours today and finally got to the end of my driveway. I'm the tiredest and most sore I've ever been, I think, maybe since like the brief little bit of period where I did football in high school. Other than that, I've never been this sore or tired, I don't think. And so hopefully it'll be a good episode anyway. Now, before we begin, we should always start with our Poets Respond poet. And today's Sunday's poet can't be here. She's flying on a plane back from a protest, actually, or an event in support of Ukraine. Julia Kolchinsky Dasbach had 1 year later. A year ago, she had that erasure poem, Me and Ukraine. And now she comes back with a villanelle 1 year later, 1 year into the war. And Julia says, let me put this on the screen. Julia says, it's the week of the 1 year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today, February 21st, is exactly a year since Putin's heinous speech foreshadowed the invasion with his perversion of history, staking claim to a sovereign nation and people. It's a year since I coped with the inevitability of this war by transforming his speech into an erasure published here too. This war in my birthplace has continued to be a daily reality of my life, just as it has for most of those in the Ukrainian diaspora. But for many other Americans, this war has moved into a periphery, or completely out of view. According to recent polls, a little less than half of Americans support continued military aid, with a third outright against it, and the rest apathetic to U.S. involvement. Inspired by Jeanne Debrou's masterful villanelle Civilian from her forthcoming book, Civilians, I was moved to write one too, the refrains bouncing and echoing in my head until I got them down on paper. This poem is a plea for continued U.S. as well as global support and vigilance, for refusal to look away from the war, for action, and if you are able, please consider contributing to an aid organization that helps those who are in Ukraine and refugees trying to flee. I recommend Ukraine Trust Chain, an all-volunteer-run nonprofit started by Ukrainian immigrants in the U.S. They work with local volunteers on the ground, going directly into areas hard to reach by larger international organizations. Trust Chain provides urgent food, medical supplies, and transportation to safer regions. And so that was her note. I want to read the whole thing because she couldn't be here, of course, so we want to get all that out. Julia is going to be the guest on the Rattlecast. I think the date was May 1st, maybe, or April 17th. So she's going to be here again to do a full episode with her new book. But here she is reading this villanelle. Just a wonderful, and I love the way that this could be an anti-war poem for any time in any war, too. So it really has a timeless quality to it. Here's Julia Kolchinsky Dasbach's 1 year later.
1 year later. It's easy to look away from war when your wallet's empty and sink is full, when the land and people aren't yours, when your children scream for more of you, when your body's pulled. It's easy to look away from war. The soil across the water to earth's core brims blood, but look, the sunflowers still bloom when the land and people aren't yours. So you focus on the daily chores, dig out a trench of laundry, linens, wools. It's easy to look away from war, with the dog barking, mailman at the door. Your children speak a stranger's tongue at school. The land and people aren't yours. How does a house become a shore no news can reach? Are we that cruel? Or is it just that easy to look away from war when the land and people aren't yours?
And once again, that was Julia Kolchinsky Dasbach reading 1 year later, 1 year into the war in Ukraine. We're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest now, Abby E. Murray. So sit tight, and I will be right back with Abby. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Abby E. Murray, originally from the Pacific Northwest. Abby E. Murray has moved around the country and taught writing in Colorado, Georgia, Alaska, New York, and Washington, where she served as the 2019 to 2021 Poet Laureate for the city of Tacoma. Her first book, Hail and Farewell, which I have right here, won the 2019 Perugia Press Prize and was a finalist for the Washington State Book Award. Previous chapbooks include How to Be Married After Iraq from Finishing Line Press, Quick Draw, Poems from a Soldier's Wife from Finishing Line Press as well, and Me and Coyote from Lost Horse Books. You can find all of her work at abbyeMurray.com, and here she is, Abby E. Murray. Hey, Abby, how you doing?
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Yeah, it's just a pleasure to have you. You're one of those poets that we've published so many times. I was looking up; it's actually 13 times in Poets Respond. Which
really?
is not quite the record, but very close. And
wow.
Everybody just loves your work. And one of the most popular poems is that what was it called? Taking My Daughter to the War Protest or something like that. Whatever the title was. Yeah,
I think that was the first one with Poets Respond.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was a good. Oh no, it wasn't a war protest. I think it was a Trump protest. I think maybe right.
That was the women's march.
That's right. That's what it was. Yeah. Well, it's really cool to have you. Do you want to start out by reading a poem?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm going to start with a poem called The War Tramples Us. It's on page 13 in Hail and Farewell. And I wrote this after living in Alaska. I lived in a duplex. And this was what happened to my neighbor. The war tramples us. Upstairs, my neighbor reads about carbon monoxide. We communicate without language at the shared mailbox, where we wait for letters shipped in crates from Iraq. When I say nothing to her, she says nothing back. The floorboards groan when she rocks her two boys into a deep sleep, an ocean of night. She floats to the garage, curls up on the back seat of her Jeep, and tracks the brown moths crawling across fluorescent lights. They drop like folded paper. Later, a man in fire gear delivers her to my porch. He says we should evacuate. She apologizes, her voice the hollow boom of babies carried off in an ambulance. What can I do? I lean against the door frame, smelling poison.
And that was The War Tramples Us, again from Hail and Farewell, Abby Murray's first full-length book from Perugia Press. And so the book is really a fascinating read because it's something that we don't see a lot in poetry. Like it feels like military life is something totally separate from sort of literary life. There are a handful of poets, Brian Turner and people like that writing about their experiences in war. A few others who've been like Bill Gloss, who've been on the podcast, a Vietnam veteran who writes about that. And so there are a few poets, but it's a thing that's like reading about what goes on as the wife of somebody in the military was so interesting because it's just something that's not spoken of very often. How did that come to be? And sort of of course, the description of the book describes the contrast between you as a pacifist, having married somebody who's a soldier. How did that come to be? And what was it like experiencing that for the first time? Was it something you had any familiarity with at all?
It kind of was in that, as I would say, as a high schooler, that's kind of when I started writing poetry, when so many of us do. I was pretty obnoxiously and ignorantly pacifist, as you would expect a teenager to be. And when I went away to college, I started learning a little bit more about myself and about our country's history. And that was where I met Tom. And he was in ROTC, so he was already Army bound. The war in Iraq, every day was just more and more imminent. And we actually met because we were arguing a lot on campus. And he just kept calling back and wanting to get together more, which was ridiculous to me. So we've always been in conflict. We've always been a contrast. We're definitely not one of those couples where, I'm not married to a poet. I don't think I could be married to a poet. They would drive me crazy. But the military, we're finding out the military and the literary life have a lot of similarities. But yeah, you're right. They, on the Venn diagram, I think of our culture, they don't usually come in contact with each other very often.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So, what similarities do they have in common between military life and literary life?
The first thing that comes to mind is the hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
of military is very familiar, I think, to anyone who's especially in the literary, like the publishing business, which I think is, just has such a completely different feel from the actual creation and artistic side
Mm.
of the poetry world. But those hierarchies are kind of the same. And yeah, the second thing that comes to mind is that there's also shame and pride are both,
Hmm.
kind of at the center of these two forms of service. So yeah, they actually have a lot in common if you have time to sit down and think about it, they have a lot in common.
Yeah, that's really interesting because shame and pride do come so much into poetry. I mean, I've gotten over this, but I used to, if I was like sitting next to somebody on a plane and they would say, "What do you do for a living?" I'd be like, "Oh, I edit a magazine." And they're like, "Oh, what kind of magazine?" I'm like, "Oh, a literary magazine." And they're like, "Oh, what kind of literary magazine?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's poetry." And then they're like, "Oh." And then it was like a weird sort of like, I don't know what to say to this guy next to me kind of
Right.
experience. And I've gotten over that. And now, like, if you approach it the right way, I think people are curious and interested, and it works a lot better than
Yeah.
being timid about it. But it's like we have so much pride in our poems, but then there's this way that, I don't know, I guess society doesn't respect it or something like that. And so we have a
Mhm.
shame too. Is that what you mean by the shame?
Yeah, I mean that plus also like that so much of poetry I think is a way of understanding shame, at least with some of my writing and or maybe it's just my writing lately, kind of processing shame and understanding it more clearly. I just turned 40 and this is like I feel like I should be having my midlife crisis right now. So I'm doing a lot of reflecting and thinking and processing shame and wondering about regret. And I think that shame plays a part in a lot of really powerful poems that I love and
Hmm.
a lot of poets' lives who I love.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that we, don't look at a lot directly. And then so it's the lens of poetry becomes a great way of exploring it. Well, let's
Mhm.
talk more in a minute, but let's hear another poem first.
Yeah. Um, so I'm going to read Gwen Stefani Knows How to Get Everything I Want. Um, I received a magazine in the mail on mistake when I was a PhD student. I lived up in upstate New York, and that was where I wrote about this happening. Gwen Stefani knows how to get everything I want. It takes a misdelivered Cosmo to finally understand what I want and how to get it. Gwen Stefani tells the truth on page 89. We believe in Gwen because her apron of chain link stars sparkles over a black bustier. Star-spangled bondage, says an editor. She slouches, holds the heel of her right white Louboutin in one hand, as if to say, Congress respects my body. As if to say, rifles aren't worth shooting. This is what I want, and Gwen is here to deliver. When she slips into a red sport coat and jeans, she comes in loud and clear. Grant proposals that write themselves, cartons of baby formula sold from unlocked shelves at CVS, 8 days of rain over California. Because Gwen knows how to get everything I want, she can afford to be an optimist. Pharrell is rad. Her mom is rad. The whole world is rad. I agree, Gwen. I do. And I'd be giddy too in that baby blue jacket, its faux bullet spikes screaming peace talks and pacifism, bubblegum fingernails that tell me soldiers who drop my writing class are only on vacation. She pulls her Union Jack sunglasses down with one finger. This means Ruth Stone never died, but went into hiding. It means the grocery store lobsters have escaped. It means I can refinance. Gwen steps into a pair of fishnets as if to say the 2nd Infantry Division won't return to Iraq, as if to say minke whales are singing on the Japanese coast.
That was another poem from Hail and Farewell. That was a Gwen Stefani Knows How to Get Everything I Want. Another great poem and great artwork too on this. I think I've seen that before. Is it just because I've seen your book cover before, or is that something that was a famous sculpture like post 9/11 or something like that?
It is, yeah. I don't think it's on display right now, but I think it's at, is it St. John's? It's in New York City. The artist is Meredith Bergman, and she's made several sculptures that are, I think, really recognizable when you look them up online.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it before, and I just couldn't remember. How hard was it? That's one of the things that I don't know, people don't really understand. How hard was it to get the permission to use that as the cover? Was she excited to do the book, or was it difficult?
She was excited and she was wonderful to work with, but you would have to ask Becky. Rebecca Allender is the editor of Perugia and is just wonderful to work with. I still consider being the Tacoma Poet Laureate and having this book, Hail and Farewell, at Perugia. These were like the two best things to ever happen to me as a poet. And but she found the cover after having conversations with me about kind of what I was envisioning, and we looked at a couple of different artists, and she reached out, and she has good pull. I mean, she publishes beautiful books. So
yeah, she definitely does. And so, what was it? You that picked that image, or was it her?
I think it was her that found that sculptor, and then we looked at her different collections of work. And this one just really stands out, especially because, I mean, this book is really looking at the impact of war, something that I think I've always been fascinated with, at least for the past 20 years, since I've been with Tom, looking at the reaching impact of war. I think we always think the battle story and the combat veteran, and we don't often see or explore, those reaching impacts of war that don't really go away. And this image, I mean, it quite literally is impact, with things colliding.
Yeah, for those just listening, I should have said the image that we're looking at here, it's a sculpture. It's a nude of a woman who has her hands up kind of over her face almost, and she's blocking two airplanes. And sort of her arms are kind of like towers that sort of make you think about the Twin Towers on 9/11 as if she's blocking them. But it's sort of a serene expression too, which is really interesting and moving. So anyways, the cover of Hail and Farewell. Earlier you mentioned that you and your husband Tom have like disagreements, and that was sort of the basis of your relationship. I'm curious, what have you learned in the process of that from each other? Have you like sort of moved more toward a unified thing, or are you always in complete disagreement about that?
I think it depends on what time of year you ask us. I'm maybe, I don't know, Tom might be watching this, so I want to say we're getting ready to move. I'm in DC right now, and he's actually in Washington State already. He started his new assignment out at JBLM there. I think, as you were asking the question, I was like, I would really like to say that Tom and I, have learned so much, and we've become this like, exquisitely tolerant couple, when really like, Tom is my buddy and Tom is my confidant, and I trust Tom. But at the same time, I have always disagreed with Tom, and I think I'm always going to. And he's always disagreed with me. He has never understood, I mean, a lot of what I do too. And I think a lot of people are just like, oh, Abby, she clearly doesn't understand what Tom does. She has weird hair and tattoos and says fuck all the time. And like, so she doesn't understand what it's like to be this, commander's wife. And I'm like, well, Tom doesn't understand really what it's like to be this poet who feels everything, way too much. So it's, it's a beautiful partnership. It's a messy democracy. I like it.
Yeah. Is there any advice you have? Because it's a rare kind of relationship to have that much disagreement. There's that one, is it Carvel, the political family where one is a Republican, the other's a Democrat, and you just can't imagine their conversation every night. Yeah. So is there a way that you I mean, it's just, I think it's such an important thing to be able to get past people's opinions and perspectives, especially because we all have different, like psychological traits as our background view of the world. And so, and that affects so much of how we see things and how we think. And we're sort of given that at birth, basically. I mean, my two kids have their personalities were just like in the womb. They were like exactly how they're always going to be. And those things lead to a certain perspective. And it really, it's the way that society is supposed to function, having a diversity of opinions and views of things. So it seems to me like it would be a great sort of almost a Buddhist sense of like letting go, like, or compartmentalizing, or how do you do it? Like, how do you have such strong disagreements, but then still have love and never let that die?
I think, I mean, vulnerability plays a huge role in it. I think that, and the vulnerability in the relationship isn't just mine. Tom also has to be vulnerable. And I think, that's also something that we kind of brush away when we think of people in the military. We think of no vulnerabilities, or we think that if they do have vulnerabilities, they're not aware of them. We make a lot of assumptions, I think, about people in the military. So vulnerability definitely plays a part. You have to still be open to that, even after a lot of difficult or traumatizing experiences. You have to stay open to that. I think that the key really is being able to communicate, and also knowing that you're not always going to communicate well. Just because you've been together longer doesn't mean it's always going to be getting better. Like sometimes it sucks and sometimes it will get better. But the only way it gets better is if you're communicating. So I think language really plays a huge part in that as well.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Well, let's keep the poems going because I want to make sure we do enough of them because poems are great and why we're here. So what do you want to read next?
Actually, so I'm going to read When He Receives Orders to Afghanistan and a Parking Ticket, How to Respond. This poem is actually kind of, when I was picking poems for this, I could kind of see where a lot of my writing now is coming from. And I think this is where it was starting to germinate, of me processing all the things I've been told to do, and then processing them through poetry. So in a lot of ways, as a spouse, you are told to respond a certain way. When he receives orders to Afghanistan and a parking ticket, how to respond. What you say matters, each word tagged and monitored like an eaglet. Make your voice a small bird, the kind he can hold in the palm of his hand. Chickadee, sparrow, canary. Use words that behave in the corridors of memory. Don't say fuck. Don't be a blue jay. Don't crack your head on the window or rifle through his duffel. Don't ask where he parked. When he hands you the ticket, its charges printed in dark red script. Let the checkbook fly from your purse like a finch. Post payment immediately and sing, sing, sing. Don't hoard bits of paper. Don't shred his orders. Don't bark. Don't pick. You are not a magpie. You are not a crow. Your voice is a long, sweet song. Build a nest on his shoulder and rest your head there. Fill his ears with feathers so downy and slight, they can flood a canal and never weigh more than an ounce.
And that was When He Receives Orders to Afghanistan and a Parking Ticket, How to Respond, from Helen Farewell. So what was the most surprising thing that you found as the wife of an officer in the military? Was it how is life different than you would have imagined it? Because it really was a culture shock almost for me when I started playing softball with a bunch of people who work at Edwards Air Force Base. And there's a whole different, such a different culture. I mean, they're moving around all the time. And so it makes it so they're like sort of fast friends with people who are in the same area. And there's that kind of camaraderie, but there's also like there's just a separateness to it as far as the community goes too. And sort of I don't know, there's a lot of like positive aspects to it as well. Like a lot of caring and a lot of like camaraderie and like working together to do things like the softball team that I'm on, which was like 9 out of 10 people are from the Air Force Base. So what was it that was most surprising for you in that experience?
Um, I I'm not sure. Maybe I was really pessimistic when I was young, but I feel like the maybe the most surprising thing that I've really learned is I have learned that I have a lot more strength than I thought I did.
Mm.
I did not when I graduated from, undergrad. I got married when I was in college too, which I don't recommend. I mean, if my daughter comes home and she's 18, 17 years old and says, I met this guy and he's an ROTC, we're going to get married. Like, it's not going to go down the way it went down for me. Um, but when I graduated, I didn't have the confidence I think that I needed, and I have discovered that I have a lot more strength than I realized. As far as the military culture, I think, especially as it concerns military spouses, one of the surprising things is how they make it, how easy the military as an institution makes it to isolate yourself. There's so much encouragement to not leave post. Don't get involved in civilian groups. Like, you don't need to leave. Why would you need to leave? There's a PX, there's a Starbucks, there's wives clubs. Like, you don't ever need to leave. You can stay here. And the encouragement to isolate by calling it insulation and by calling it comfort is really drastic, especially when your spouse ends up getting out of the military. And then you're like, well, what now? Now I'm permanently in this community outside the gates. What do I do?
Yeah, and it does almost feel like a church, like having that sense of community that is the one thing as an atheist myself. I feel like sort of an envy about people who I know who get to go to church every Sunday and have the sense of community around them. So that sounds familiar too in that regard. I want to talk too about, because you've worked on poetry with veterans in groups like that, and poetry as a method of healing is such an important thing. We interviewed James Pennebaker a couple of years ago about his work on expressive writing and the actual healing that comes from that. How did you get into working with veterans like that? And what has your experience been like? Have you found that it's been healing for people who would participate in those programs?
Yeah, in my experience, I've definitely worked with more people who have found that the practice of writing poetry or fiction, nonfiction, the practice of writing has led to therapeutic results for sure, but not everybody. And I've always been interested in working with service members since when I was in high school, before I knew Tom, I was very interested in why our country goes to war, and what our country tells people when it goes to war versus the reality. And I've always been really interested in that. And so working with veterans was always very interesting to me. I have loved working with vets, even though, I consider myself anti-war. I'm not anti-service member at all. I'm definitely interested in how do we write critically and accurately about the systems we find ourselves in, even if those systems have served us well, or even if those systems have brutalized people. How do we continue being honest? I mean, honesty is dangerous. So working with veterans, I think, has always been really fascinating to me.
And when you teach with those workshops, do you do veteran poets? Like, Wilfred Owen is, I think, one of the most amazing poets. It's really tragic that he died so young. And I don't know, do you do veteran poets like that, like Brian Turner, etc., or do you do like a broad view of poetry?
It kind of depends on the organization that is asking me to come in there. Often, if it is a veterans organization, I will stick to poets who are writing specifically about the experiences of war and the impact of war. I think I especially lean toward bringing in authors who are more women writers. Teresa Fazio, bring in her memoir, definitely. Lauren Kay she has a book coming out very soon in the next couple of weeks, The Fine Art of Camouflage. I want to bring in more women, and definitely bringing in more family members. Lisa Stice is another great poet. And so yeah, I often will kind of tailor it to include, and my emphasis is always on including the margins, especially.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Bruce Weigel, Eric Campbell mentions, another veteran poet who he actually has a poem coming up in Rattle, I think in the summer issue, so we'll probably have him on the Rattlecast at some point.
Oh,
Also,
wonderful.
Sarah Monroe says it's George and Kellyanne Conway who I was thinking of. Exactly. Yeah,
Oh
yeah, in that
God,
relationship.
we are not George and Kellyanne Conway.
No. Well, if anybody has any questions for Abby, feel free to leave them in the comments, either on Facebook or YouTube, and I will pass any along that makes sense. But let's hear another poem in the meantime. I think this is the last poem from the book you wanted to read, right?
Sure, yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna read Poem for Boys. Um, this book is also, I mean, it looks at the impact of military, but it's also looking at my childhood and looking at my own feminism. Um, and that's what this poem I think is trying to do. Poem for Boys. 9 years old, and I thought boys were the unlucky ones, born with the tragic body part, a disease they wore on the outside, like a barnacle or drooping fin. On the bus after school, Andrew Martin flung his hands over his zipper when I stood up fast, missed my stop by a mailbox. I thought boys were a burden, watched Colin cry in the secret garden while Mary tore his shutters open, heard my grandmother gripe about the boys who became president, became traffic cops. I expected greatness from boys the way I expected it from jellyfish, feared them as I feared seaweed, how it washed up in knots with the driftwood. When I was 9, boys were an exercise in compassion, and I confessed to Father David that I did not like them. They were frail and impractical, too much like roses. Andrew Martin's mother told him he could be anything he wanted, and I told Andrew she lied. In my house, only girls had the grit to transform themselves. My mother's finger looped in gold she bought herself. When I was 9, I told boys I could breathe underwater and drew gills behind my ears with permanent marker. My teacher scrubbed and scrubbed. I could taste the soap in my throat.
And that was a poem for boys. Another poem from Hail and Farewell, Abby Murray's first book from Perugia Press, which was a finalist for the Washington State Book Award. So do check that out if you would. Beautiful cover too, right there. So when I think of you, Abby, the thing that comes to mind most is that you were in the best two programs, in my opinion. If people ask me what the two programs are that are the best, I always say Pacifica University with that slate of great teachers that are there, Marvin Bell included while he was alive. And then SUNY Binghamton, where Maria Gillen is sort of runs the show and has for so long. And we've had great relationships with both of them. So it feels like you have had just the best poetry education possible, I would say. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
like you have the MFA and then you have the PhD. Like literally, you are the best educated poet you could possibly be, I think. So first question, how did you end up in the two best programs there are? Like, what were you looking for and how did you know they were so good? Because they are. I mean, it's because we publish so many poems in those poets from those programs. It's just like you can see, you can see that they're writing real things with the music and a depth to it, but like not sort of superficially clawing for that hierarchy you mentioned earlier, but like genuine poets seem to all come from those programs. And there's so many Rattle Poetry Prize winners and stuff that do, and our chapbook series is full of them. So how did you find that program? Like, what were you looking for, and what was your experience like there?
So when I applied for MFA programs, I did that at the encouragement of my mother. I moved to Alaska and was really depressed, and she was like, you need to start writing again. You need to go and study writing." So I did. I looked up MFA programs. I was accepted to one in California, and I can't recall the name of the school. But it was a resident, you had to be there, you had to live there. And I was like, why did I even apply here? I can't go anywhere because I move every like 8 to 9 months. And So I also applied for one low residency program, which was Pacific. And I got in there and I was so glad because you went to a residency in January and June, and then did everything else by correspondence. And every single residency, I came from a different place. I was either in Oregon or Washington, Alaska. I think I was done by the time I was in Georgia. But I lived in Atlanta and then I lived in Columbus, Georgia too. So it low residency made the most sense. When I went there, it was Marvin at Marvin's encouragement. He had read my application.
Yeah. And so what do you think that those two programs have in common? I mean, what makes them, is there something that, being that both programs you can sort of see that they do right? They must be.
Yeah, I mean, they have genuinely good poets and loving, kind poets working for them.
Hmm.
And I think, maybe that's not as common as we think. I think to be not only a really just dynamite poet, but also just a really good fucking person. Like that's really hard to find. And like Maria Gillen and Joe Weil, I mean, at Binghamton, those are really good people. And I want to be around Maria all the time. I have like an inner Maria in my voice and like in my head. And she's very, very helpful. Like, so yeah, just having really good poets who actually care about you as a person, and care about your poetry.
Hmm. And so
Yeah.
why did you start writing poetry in the first place? Was there something that drew you to it?
Well, so I grew up with a single mom and I had five sisters. So I had three adopted sisters and two biological sisters and just my mom. So our house was lots of estrogen, and lots of athletes. I was involved in dance. I played the violin. I did all these things, but my sisters always competed with me, and poetry was the first thing that none of my sisters wanted. So I like once I did it, I was like, oh, I kind of like this. So I ended up sticking with it. And then I think later in high school, when I realized that poetry could be subversive, I was just sold. I was like, okay, I'm in. This is kind of who I am.
Hmm. And writing on that, there's a question from Eric Campbell. He says, if you had to choose the primary function of poetry today, would you say it is communal therapeutic, like sort of a public, communal therapeutic thing, or literary, like print-based and consumed in isolation?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know if I would consider it either of those. I think poetry is, by all practices, it is communication. You write to communicate. Even when people say, oh, I just write for myself and I, burn the papers or whatever, you're still writing in a shared language. It's a common language, and you are writing to communicate and connect with others. So if connection and communication ends up being therapeutic, cool. If it ends up getting you published, cool. It will not always do either one or both of those things, but primarily it's communication.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder if the therapeutic aspect is going to have to be the main thing eventually because of the whole AI and the chat GPT thing. If you're
Mhm.
writing to please other people in that way, it's not going to be long before all it takes is somebody to train AI on poetry and not just what the internet thinks of poetry, and they're going to be writing good
Right.
poems, and then we're going to be in trouble,
Yeah.
I think. So
Yeah.
how do you like think of that, like poetry going forward? Do you think that to me, I feel like it's going to have to be more about that aspect that's always there, which is that sort of spiritual, meditative, therapeutic thing that we do in processing our life, and noticing the world more. It makes life better when you're writing poetry. And I think that aspect has to take the front seat, because if you're just writing to please others, people are going to be faking those poems with AI and pretending they're theirs. And there's going to
Yeah.
be no way. There's an arms race already. I think, I don't know if you saw, but which was it? Clark's World, I think, shut down submissions because they were getting so many written by
Yeah.
Chat GPT. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's coming for poetry soon.
Yeah.
So what do you think of it going forward? What do you think the future is in terms of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think people have been having a lot of fun with it. I mean, I can't, maybe I'm kind of I think I have a lot of dark humor, and I think that's definitely from my proximity to the military. But like when all this started happening, I was kind of like, oh, of course. Of course, there's a fucking chatbot that's going to write poems and like, I'm going to write all these stories and submit a ton of them. And like, um, so but I honestly, I don't feel too worried. I feel, no one can take my experiences, no one can, copy my connections with other people. um, Crimes can be committed and language can be stolen, and stories can be stolen, but it doesn't mean that they are no longer owned, by the people who have them. I mean, I don't think it can take those stories. So I think I agree with you that that poetry is going to be changing.
Mm-hmm.
But as it does all the time. I mean, the way that like most poems being published today don't look like most poems being published 30 years ago. So everything, it's always constantly changing. And just because technology is developing doesn't mean that poets aren't developing too. I think poets are constantly shifting and changing. So I feel like poets and our stories and our lives and what we need from poetry is constantly changing. So we're hard to catch, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not
Yeah.
too worried, but maybe I'm naive.
I don't know. I think, from an editor's perspective, I'm a little worried myself, just how I might have to have at some point a submission fee, which I was always like never ever. But if people are just like throwing in, chat GPT poems, I mean, that's one,
Yeah.
reason to not. It's something you could sort of leverage and make a profit off of, even if you're doing it quick enough, which really might screw up the whole submission system, which is what that Clark's World shutting down was a big eye opening. I hadn't considered that aspect of it. So I'm not sure either. But I do think it's like the radio, like when, that was where our stories were for a while, was on the radio, people sitting around that. And then the TV came and people thought, oh, no one's going to have a radio in 20 years. And then it became a whole different purpose in the car, and then talk radio and those call-in shows, and now podcasts. It's all a way that sort of technology, we find uses for it still. And I think we definitely will with poetry. That's for sure.
Well, and I think with Rattle too, don't you have poets say something about is it something about the piece, or is it more of a creative bio? Because I know that at Collateral, I have conversations with every writer that we publish about the piece. So it would be awkward to have that conversation with a chatbot. I'm not saying it's not possible, but doesn't Rattle do that too, where you kind of interact that way?
Yeah, we do definitely interact, and then the bio at the end doesn't have to be about the piece itself, but it does often. For the first one, usually people talk more in general, and then they start getting specific if they have extra poems, and for Poets Respond, it's always about that too. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about. But going back to your writing process and your learning through all these great poets, that Marvin Bell, we have that tribute to Marvin Bell that we published over the summer, and Maria, like, what did you learn from those great poets that you applied to your own writing, and how has your writing evolved through meeting them?
Yeah. Marvin told me he did not want me to apply to PhD programs. I think he was thinking that academia has a way of drying up creativity, and squashing creativity. And I applied anyway, but he told me, whatever you do, protect your urge to write. And I imagined it for some reason, and I've told my students this too. I don't know if this metaphor actually works, but what I was picturing when he said that was like there's a hurricane going around me. Everything is flying, houses are flying, cars, and I have my creativity under this cloche, and I'm protecting it, like, with all that I have. Like, so I am very protective of my creativity. I'm very conscious of when I am being overworked to the point where I'm thinking about cutting into that time that I reserve for creativity. And I don't write regularly. Like, I don't have like a certain hour that I write. Marvin was really good about that. I'm just like, I mean, I have a third grader, and I am usually solo parenting and, patching jobs together. Like, I do not have a set time to write, but I do write a poem a week. I do write an essay a week, and I send it to a group of poets, and a group of readers to keep myself accountable. And I am conscious of when I'm starting to dip into that time, because that's definitely precious, and that's what Marvin taught me. I think Maria taught me to not be afraid of um, what other people think of you, and what other people think of poetry. Just because something is corny, like believing in yourself, doesn't mean you need to give a fuck.
Mhm.
And Maria was so good at that. And like, she just lived it in front of you. And it was brilliant. It was kind of like, walking behind someone who's just hacking the blackberries down, and you get to walk right along behind. So, I mean, she had a certain bravery and courage that was really necessary to me when I met her.
Hmm. Well, you have some newer poems that you sent. Do you want to read one of those?
Yeah. Let's see which one. So I was going to read a newer poem. This is the one that I wrote last week. And I like to try out new stuff, see how it goes. And I was thinking, because I'm about to move, I've been thinking about how I was just telling people here that I'm moving again, and they're like, "You just got here," and I think I'm mostly friends with people who are not in the military and don't understand this lifestyle at all, and so they're like, "Well, where are you from?" And it's funny that the bio you introduced me with is originally from the Pacific Northwest, because this poem is like, I don't fucking know where I'm from. Um, so this is "You're from Nowhere." If you have too many hometowns or none at all, if you willingly carry the dark Alaska months within you, but shrug off its infinite summers, if you take the word y'all from Georgia, but not its balmy winters, if you miss the snow in Colorado, in New York, if you mistake the metro for MARTA, if you walk toward a cafe in Portland while hungry in downtown DC, if you call more than one team yours at a single baseball game, if you can recite each Seattle zip code you've used, but none of the highways in Columbus, if you think forever home means cemetery, if you think belonging is two words, if the neighbors ask where you're from and you pause to wonder, that's an answer. They'll want to show you how they were born and bred here, which is a bread you can't taste anywhere. You can chew and chew its crust and still not get it. That flavor of knowing where you are before you know how to leave it.
That was great. That was a brand new poem, "You're from Nowhere" by Abby E. Murray, hot off the press from last week. So I love writing a poem once a week, which is why we do the Rattlecast prompts. It's really fun to have something, and then trying different things all the time. How do you get yourself into that one poem that you're going to write? Is there a certain process that you do, or do you it just goes how it goes every time?
I mean, sometimes it's different. I've noticed a pattern because I've been doing this poem every week and sending it to a group since like 2016, and it started as a way to get through faculty meetings on Friday afternoon. Why in God's name are faculty meetings always at 4 o'clock on a Friday? It is beyond me, but I have never been mentally present there. And so writing a poem and sending it to colleagues was a way to get through these meetings. I've noticed though in the last few years, I send it out on Friday before midnight. That's my rule. Saturday, I'm spent. Sunday, I'm pretty spent. Monday, I am starting to get an idea or something has pissed me off. Tuesday, I start putting things down on the page and I hate writing. I hate everything I've written, but I force myself to keep it. Wednesday, I start refining, kind of pulling out the like main idea that I have on the page, something that feels worth keeping to me. I pull that aside. Thursday is fine tuning, and then Friday I write an essay to go with it.
So what is the essay? It goes with the poem somehow?
Yeah. So it's kind of turned into an essay. I need to put these together into a book because I have like one a week for the past, however many years. So I have all these essays about, sometimes it's about what happened during the week. This past week, it was about all the different places I've moved. I did like a short little one paragraph for every place I lived in. And moved from. So, and then it went with this poem. So sometimes it does.
Do you find essay writing to be very different from poetry? Because I do, to me, an essay, you're sort of searching in the same way. Like you're just sort of talking more or something.
Yeah.
Like there's a way that in a good essay, you don't really know where you're going or it ruins it. And it's the same way
Yeah.
with poetry. Like you have to sort of have this like itch that you need to scratch, and you're kind of
Yeah.
like nosing your way through and following some kind of scent. And then at the end, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And that's when an essay works. I think that's how it works. And that's how a poem works too. So it feels very similar,
Yeah.
actually.
It does feel really similar. And I think they're similar in that both of them are sort of, you know, it's like looking in the sun. You don't want to look directly at it. You want to be respectful of it and just let it happen if the idea comes to you. But I do find that I tend to be good at either one at a time. Like poems are coming really easily for me. I'll have a week where I write 3 and they feel really strong. And I hate essays. Like I sit down to write it and I'm like, I hate this. This is stupid. And so I'll usually write about how much I hate writing essays. And then I'll have months where the essays come freely. And so I don't know. Yeah, they are similar and they're also different.
Yeah. There's a question here from Liz Culpepper. She says, I'm a fellow Army spouse and writer. Do you ever get pushback from folks in the military community?
Girl, yes. Yes. Yeah, super awkward. Pretty uncomfortable. And Liz, I'm going to remember this question. So I'm writing a book of poems. I recently went to wife school in the fall. It's at Fort Leavenworth. And it's for commanders' wives. And it's exactly what it sounds like. And I'm writing a chapbook of poems about this. And it's going to be really awkward. And I expect to get pushback. And so it's really uncomfortable. I wish I had a way of saying it's okay. But it's usually not. It's really hard. There's a lot of pushback, and a lot of the time, most of the pushback is from other military spouses who should be supporting you, but who are saying, you know, they've given up a lot for this lifestyle, and to see you writing how you're going to write about it, you know, your own truth, is often seen as a threat. So it can be really painful and it can be really scary, but in my opinion, so far, it has been incredibly worth it. It's been a survival skill so far.
Mm-hmm. And so that's more from other people in the military. What about the sort of the apparatus of the institution? Do they ever get upset? I mean, I think, especially, you know, when the topics are anti-war, I mean, they spend good money to like fly over the Super Bowl and have all that stuff that's going on, you know, and they don't want some poet undercutting their investment in the next generation's recruits, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I have experienced some. So at wife school, a general came and spoke, and he was on the stage, and there were hundreds of people, and you know, it was time they were encouraging military spouses to ask questions, and you know, the first question was a spouse, and she wanted a picture with him, and so like they, you know, did push-ups and like came up and you know, took pictures. And I asked a question about whether or not there was going to be a development of any kind of policy for military leadership communicating online, because of the case with Colonel Donahue, who was, you know, they keep using the word defending women when Tucker Carlson was making comments. Anyway, he was investigated after he tweeted about it. And I was asking about policy and whether policy was going to be developed. It wasn't handled well. And my husband actually happened to be working in the Pentagon. And the person working for the general was like, what happened there? You know, it didn't, this was a total mess. And so, yeah, there can be pushback, I think, from the institution as well. But I have to say, too, I've gotten a lot of support from the military institution, too. I can't tell you how many service members and officers that I've gotten to work with who have just been so thrilled at hearing their own writing voices, who have been thrilled at being able to tell their own stories. So like, even though I'm talking about pushback, I feel like I receive a lot more support than pushback. I should clarify that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know somebody who sort of quit being a poetry person and still writes poetry, but quit to become a copywriter for the Pentagon, and was just always was talking about how much respectful it was, and how much, as opposed to being an adjunct professor of literature at a college, it felt like, becoming royalty or something. And it is interesting, that contrast. So I want to, let's see, there's a time for two more poems. Let's do one poem and then we'll talk a little more and then do another poem. I want to make sure we get to all of them.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. How about How to Begin Your Sunday with a Broken Heart? I just wrote this after driving back home on one Sunday. How to Begin Your Sunday with a Broken Heart. Your daughter's voice, thick beneath a wet cough, thrashing like a bird in crude oil. You drive 5 miles into the city to buy her a donut frosted yellow and piped to look like an Easter chick because you can, because you have time and $3 and little else to offer. On your way home, a robin in the road, standing sentinel over a lost mitten. You swerve. At the next light, still flush with time, you circle back and park, wanting to shoo her into the cherry trees nearby, wanting to startle a problem out of your way, because who doesn't want to make room for their former self, the one who knows life is short and exists anyway, the one who takes up more space than the you who feels nothing will end, not the war, not the graves, not even a cough. You step into the road, close enough to make the robin understand, to make her take off, then close enough to see the glove she guarded is a thing with feathers, her mate struck dead. You stand where she stood, in traffic, realizing, until a car flashes its lights at you, as if to say, whatever you do, hurry up. I can't tell you whose rules you obeyed when you stooped to scoop the body into your hands. I'm not sure whose funeral you moved toward when you found the robin waiting at the base of a tree, still teaching you how to mourn, how to collect a sorrow. She was so still. You could have touched her. She could have flown away. You laid her wild grief at her feet, and she let you.
And there was another new poem, How to Begin Your Sunday with a Broken Heart by Abby E. Murray. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk more about Poet Respond a little bit and how you approach that, because you do, I mean, I should say too that so many times, in addition to the dozen or whatever we've published, like you have so many poems that are like, oh, that's one of my top 5. I mean, I see your name like almost every week. And you just have great poems all the time. So how do you approach news and current events and write in a way, it's so easy to have an opinion, but so hard to have like a poetic opinion, I guess you could say, where, it's not just preaching to the choir and, not like saying that. I always think about how Troy Jallamore was like, political poems are just, cheering on your own values. Like, aren't my values good? And, there's a way that you have to, get beyond that and to sort of be gnawing at some kind of problem every time or else it doesn't work. So how do you do that? How do you make, when you have specific, polarized type political opinions, which you obviously do, how do you cut through that to make relevant poetry that's actually creative in the way that poetry is?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are weeks where I don't write about what is happening in current events, and so I can't submit those. The one from last week, the You're From Nowhere. I mean, that had nothing to do with what was going on in the news. But I think one of my strengths as a poet is that, maybe this is from Maria, is like, I can really flip a switch and not give a shit what people think. I'm very wary of anyone who tries to tell me what poetry is. I'm very wary of people who tell me, what poetry can and can't do. And I say that to my students because I'm like, I can tell you what I think poetry does based on what it has done for me. It's probably going to be different for you. And I get really annoyed. I'm very impatient with people who are like, well, this is what poetry is, and this is what poetry can't do. And you can't do this and you can do this. Like, I don't write in a space where I can hear them at all. I have a really good door that locks. And when I'm writing, I don't hear them. I don't care what they're saying. And so when I'm writing, I am able to be my authentic self. I'm unobstructed, and I can do that no matter where I am or, what has happened during my week. It's kind of like leave it at the door, as long as I don't even have to be in a safe space to be able to write that and to be able to think about language and my stories. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned what poetry's done for you. What has poetry done for you? How would you characterize it?
It's kept me alive. And I know that, I think a lot of people say that actually, but it has been a survival skill for me, moving around so often. And I think surviving the expectations of military culture, and surviving this country and the expectations, that especially that are put on women, poetry has been a way for me to survive. And as I'm talking about it, I'm kind of like, well, maybe it's the process of writing poetry too, of being able to um, not give a shit. That's really important. That has become really crucial, I think, to the way that I live my life. So poetry is always something that I can take anywhere. It doesn't require any accessories. I don't even need a pen. I don't need a computer. I can take it anywhere. And so that to me has meant a lot, because I have to be able to let go of everything else. I have to be able to let go of laptops and pens and books and stuff.
Yeah. When I first met you, it was at Maria Gillen's class, and your daughter was like just months old, and she was there at the class with you, which was so sweet. And it makes me wonder though, like, would you encourage her to take up poetry? Is it something that you encourage in her? I guess she's in third grade now.
Yeah, I do. And I write a lot about May. She's hilarious. I mean, and I spend a lot of time with her, just me and her, because Tom's gone a lot. And I do encourage her to write poetry. I know that if May does end up rebelling someday, it's going to be by hating poetry,
Yeah.
or like hating the arts. I think that would be a really good way to get to push my buttons really quickly. So good luck to her. But I think I don't expect her to write poetry, but I am always talking, I think, especially about telling the truth, and the importance of being honest, and the importance of doing what we know and what we feel and what we believe is right.
hmm Yeah, I'd say the same thing. That I think the lessons you get from poetry, which are like presence and kind of gratitude, and like noticing things and examining yourself and your emotions. You can get them a lot of different ways, but poetry is a really cool way to do it.
Yeah.
That's what I would say, I think. And one last question. So what are you working on now? This book is actually 3 years old, or almost four, I guess. And so how are you sort of organizing the poems that you have now? Are you thinking of a manuscript, or what are you working on? Like, what's the theme? Is it shifted from this topic?
Yeah. Well, kind of. I have a second book of poems that is with a couple of publishers right now, and it's like it's been a bridesmaid a couple of times in a couple of contests, but it's still under consideration at a couple of other ones. It's called Recovery Commands. And it's sort of, I don't know if poetry manuscripts can have sequels, but like it's kind of the sequel to Hail and Farewell.
Mhm.
And I have enough for a third manuscript that I haven't started compiling yet, because I'm putting together a chapbook of poems on wife school, and a book of essays, based on all those essays that I've been writing on Fridays. So I have a lot of different writing projects going on, but I also have, we publish 2 issues a year for Collateral too. So I have that, and also teaching argumentation. So I have a
Mhm.
lot.
Yeah, I forgot to like talk a little bit about collateral. Let's do that before we do the last poem. So explain why you started collateral. I should have had that earlier on, and what's your experience like been doing that, and how does the journal function?
It's an online journal, and we publish literary and visual art. There's one visual artist and many literary artists in every issue. We publish 2 a year. It's free. There's no subscription, and I, like you, don't want to charge submission fees for as long as possible. Um, and the journal is entirely based on looking at work that is examining the impact of both war and also military service. And it's all beyond the combat zone. So there's lots of places that are publishing the combat story, the combat narrative. There's not as many places, I think, publishing those reaching effects, you know, growing up the child of a combat veteran, or growing up an immigrant and moving to another country. I mean, that's what I wanted Collateral to focus on, and that's where it started. And it's been going for 7 years.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, great work with that and all the things you do. And too, like if you do, a poem a week and an essay a week, you end up with so much stuff, which is a great reason to do the Rattlecast prompt every week and then share a poem on Open Lines. Because in a couple of years, you got a whole book of poems, or 2 or 3, and you're trying to figure out how to fit them together. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have a book.
Yeah. Well, let's finish up with one last poem.
Sure. This is If I Should Succeed. And I wrote this after Ada Limon. She has a poem called If I Should Fail. And I just kind of was reading her book, and I was like, oh, I'm going to write a kind of a response poem, but If I Should Succeed. Know that my kitchen windowsill contains no less than 3 small plants I refuse to admit I've killed by failing to love them. That I cannot speak even the simplest language of measuring water and sun, not even to the hardy potted herbs I buy from the grocery store, where they are arranged in their leafy prime beneath a sign that says, grow your own, as if I will, since I can. But I haven't succeeded, not yet, not after years of inventing and reinventing my touch, imagining it softer, wiser, but still not gentle or smart enough for whichever God I'm praying to. The one who distributes life one sprig and bloom at a time, who doesn't forget me so much as she expects me to wait, amuse myself in the meantime by abandoning hope and picking it up again over and over until she returns to my kitchen in disguise, as always, rising in a loaf of rosemary bread so idyllically browned, I'll realize I did everything right, that luck had nothing to do with it. And because I lived, a good thing happened.
It's a great poem, and great poem to end on. If I Should Succeed, another newer one from Abby. Thanks so much for being a guest, Abby. It was fun, as I knew it would be. I always love your poems. So do all our viewers and readers. And it's great to meet you again and talk poetry for a while. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. This was a blast.
Cool. Well, take care. Hopefully a new book comes out. We'll have you on again.
Yeah. I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye. And that was Abby E. Murray with Hailing for Well, her newest book. You can find all of her work at Abby E. Murray. That's ABBYE Murray, MURRAY.com. AbbyEMurray.com. So do check that out. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to Open Lines. And let me put up the description on the screen. So first, if you'd like to share a poem, email it to OpenMic. That's openmic@rattle.com. Email it to me there so I can show it on the screen like Abby's poems were shown as you read. That's only for people watching at home, not on the Zoom. But email me the poem first, openmic@rattle.com. And then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to share. We copy the invite link. I'm going to post this link into the chat windows on YouTube and Facebook. So find the link only if you'd like to share a poem. You can sit right where you are if you don't have a poem to share and just enjoy all the great poems. But if you have a poem to share, email it and then join us on the Zoom. So here are the links, and I will stand up and stretch a little bit, get right back to you with the Open Lines. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Let me mute. Okay. So the prompt for this week, and I'm sorry, this is the first week I failed. I had plans to write. I had a whole hour, set up to write a poem, and I shoveled the driveway for 6 hours, and then there ended up being an extra hour of shoveling that I didn't anticipate. So I've actually shoveled for 7 hours today. And there was like 3 minutes left before the show, and I was trying furiously to write a 3-minute poem, and that just didn't work. 3-minute poem is too short. The 10-minute poem was okay last week, but 3 minutes is officially not long enough for a poem. So I'm sorry that I let you let you down this time. The prompt, though, which I have the title, and I have like the first line, so I'll write it and then share it next week. Oh, hang on a second. Let me mute this. Yeah. So if you're on the Zoom, keep it in mute until it's your turn to read. Let's see. So the prompt, though, was to write a poem about a time you faced wrong prompt. The prompt was write a poem around a simile comparing an emotion to a grammatical term, such as love as an intransitive verb or anger as a semicolon. Those are just two examples. You can do whatever you want. There's so many weird grammatical terms, which I didn't know until I started Googling. And so I have my term and I have my emotion, but I still need to write my poem. So I'll share that next week. Let's see what we've got in the meantime, though. And let's go to, to Audrey first.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Audrey, how you doing?
Oh, I love these prompts. I write things I never would have otherwise written. Tell me when you're ready.
Yeah, so what did you have I have is it bad grammar?
That's it. Okay. I may try rewriting it using semicolons instead of my backslashes.
Interesting. So what was inspired? How did this poem come to be? What inspired it?
Well, I think just the prompt itself, and I'm thinking about the semicolon, which is not often used, and the implication it has by giving that little cushion of air between two related thoughts that don't hang together. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up with a surprise. So bad grammar. Alienation is like a semicolon, separation of the clauses, like a chasm between a man and a woman who can no longer hang as a complete sentence.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, I love that. Bad Grammar by Audrey Friedman. Thanks so much, Audrey, for sharing that. That was really neat.
Thank you for the impetus.
Yeah, good use of that metaphor. All right. Yeah, it was Audrey Friedman with Bad Grammar. And next up, a first-time caller, I believe, Susan Bangs Monroe.
So I had not read the prompt. So
I should have said, too.
I
should have said that you don't have to do it for the prompt. It can be a poem about current events. It can be something you published recently, just something you wrote this week and want to share. It's totally open. So I should have included that in my little monologue there. But whatever you want to share is great. So what do you have for us?
All right. So hold on. I didn't expect you were going to accept that explanation. So
no, it's fine. While you're looking for it, tell us where you're calling from.
So I'm calling from Evanston, Illinois.
Ah, okay.
Outside of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a poem that was actually, I've been using Patti Smith's new book, A Book of Days, as a prompt every day for journaling and writing.
Mm-hmm.
He had a photo of a boulder field in Iceland. And I have hiked in Iceland with my ex-husband. So this is called Rules for Climbing a Boulder Field. Look for signs of recent avalanche, even if you've been married for years. Tread lightly, like a cat. Pretend agility. Say with confidence, I've got this. Smile as you look toward your partner, just a dot rounding the next switchback. Stand up. Once you drop to your hands, you've lost your balance and the battle. Terror will roll you. Tension will freeze you in one position. Don't lose hope. Discount the blood on your knuckles. Your banged up knees are nothing. Admire the colors, ponder the geology. Pray to the water gods who rolled the boulders smooth to hold them still. Don't be distracted by the greetings of passing strangers with better boots. When you twist your ankle, be brave. When he doesn't come back for you, be understanding and blame yourself. Do not stop to snack when you reach the path. You have catching up to do. Above all, do not blame the boulders. Adapt these rules for crossing streams, facing grizzlies, and enduring heartache.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing that. I love that line. Do not blame the boulders. That's kind of the kind of thing that you could have a tattoo of or something. That's really cool. Susan Bangs Monroe. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing that poem. Hope you share another one soon.
Okay.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you for letting me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So that was Susan Bangs Monroe. That was Rules for Climbing a Boulder Field. Great. Let's go next to Carla Schwartz. And I should say, hey, Carla, I should say, not for you specifically, but I should say it's one poem each night. I think we're just going to have one poem forever because for the last weeks and weeks we've had, I think like a dozen. It's about as much as we can handle anyway. So,
right.
Yeah.
I understand. I sent 2 poems. I just want you to read the second one yourself because it's called The Art of Shoveling. And it's like a recipe poem for shovelers. Okay. And you don't have to read it out loud. Okay. But this is called a prompt poem and it's called Grief as Ellipsis.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sad that my father died. He needed to. But I'm sad that he's gone, and my mother too. When I see their photos emerge in rotation on my screen, my father's arm enfolds my mother, not the other way around. I wonder about what arguments they might have had that day before they turned and smiled for the camera, for me. Those pictures, those times when their minds were teeth and mine had just begun to form. I hadn't then understood love or grief. In time, I came to love them both, their flaws enmeshed with mine. No argument couldn't be tamed by taking a swim or hike, but in the end, each in their turn lay down in bed to die. The shriveling of life, the fading of dreams, the unendurable weight conceived my grief.
Oh, very interesting poem, Grief as Ellipsis. And we have a lot of ellipsis there for those just watching or just listening, I should say. Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. Always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim.
Yep, take care. It was Carla Schwartz with Grief as Ellipses. Next up, we will go to Dick Westheimer.
Hello, Tim.
Hey, Dick, how you doing? Did you get your, I heard that you were stuck and needed a jump in Ohio. I wish I could have got to help, but...
Yeah. Well, I wish I could have gotten to you with my hot tub today for you to come into.
Oh, that'd be nice, because this is the source I've been in a long time. I mean, it was a lot. Like each like foot, like square foot was like 4 shovels, you know? It was just like, just to get to the earth.
Was it light snow or heavy snow?
It was pretty heavy. It's a lot of water content in that.
I was thinking about, like, you had to remember, like, to prop your screen door open before the snow hit.
Yeah.
With that much snow.
Luckily we don't. None of the houses here do. And I wonder if that's why, actually. I always wondered why people don't have screens. We don't have much bugs because it's so dry. So maybe that's part of it.
Maybe that's it.
But people just, you walking the dog at night and people just have their front door open with no screen. But yeah, it is. If you do have one, you could not get out. Which I wouldn't have thought about. Good thing we don't.
Oh, good. I'm glad you got out, and I'm glad you got back to your very comfortable office. I had such fun with the prompt poem. I didn't have time to write it. I'm working on too many other things, but I got encouraged by a fellow Rattlecaster. But I'm going to skip it tonight because I want to read my prompt poem.
Okay.
which are not my prompt poem, my Poets Respond, which is on the occasion of the 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, that was definitely the hot topic this week. We had, I'd say about 40% of submissions were about this. So it's definitely still in everybody's consciousness, even though it's not on the front page of the news, maybe.
Yeah, I think it gets good coverage. It's just sort of become a political item, as everything does, and it's getting siloed like things do. So this is a longer poem than I usually write, but I'm gonna see if I can hold my breath long enough to read the whole thing.
Okay.
And it's on it. The title is sort of explains it. On the occasion of the 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the perpetual anniversary of all the rest of the wars. And the epigraph is from Muriel Rukeyser. Then I saw what the calling was, not to me the calling, but to anyone. I am done with war. I have decided to go to the woods, and I hear the ravaged elm and oak calling to me. Trees felled in the last winter storm need tending, and the sawing and the bucking and the dragging of brush is a fine beguilement, because here the war dead are not dead, and I don't think of the endless grief of so many Yemeni, and I've seen no photos of human remains from the Horn of Africa, the 100,000 or so, because the body count is unknown, invisible, as in Mali and the Maghreb and in the forest and fields of the Rakhine state. Lost my place. Those places so far away from my TV screen mean nothing if I can't see, and even if I could, I think the pooled red blood would dry before news got to me, before I dragged back to the house to scroll through stories told of broken bones and ransacked homes, or just one woman's fear when the war-gorged men entered her town, her house, her daughter taken away, and it's all the same everywhere and always. But I have chosen one, where the living look like me, where they abide in cities full of light and opera and synagogues, one like mine, where my people have lived for 1,000 years, where the streets are lined with row homes and the farms grow the kind of food I eat, where the sunflowers bloom the same time there as here, where the songbirds of spring come to sing just like here, ignore folks like me clearing deadfall elms from woodland paths and streams. And I am not ashamed, are you, that I cannot tend to any of the dead or maimed or those driven from their homes, or even one piano not played, one lullaby not sung, one dolly not hugged, because it is spring and the first thaw frees the soil, the petrichor calls. I've sorted seed and counted the days till the first goes in the ground, and know already where I'll plant my peas and greens, and later on where the frosts and springtime storms, when the frosts and springtime storms are gone, sunflowers, 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 whose world kernels will feed both the marauding crows and me.
Yeah, Mary Lisa says great rhythm there in the comments on Zoom, and I was going to say the exact same thing. Great incantation kind of poem, Dick. And I'm glad you wrote about one because you have the book. A Sword in Both Hands is the title, right? About responding to the war in Ukraine. And we're going to have you as a guest, we decided, on, what is it, April 3rd, I think, or something like that?
April 3rd.
Yeah, there you go. So we get to learn, all the people who are used to all the great poems by Dick. We'll get to learn more about what makes Dick tick, and I'm looking forward to that. I guess I'm a poet and I don't know it. I didn't even mean to say that, but it's true. I'm curious to hear more about your background and get to hear more about this book, too, that you just put out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Tim.
Yep. Thanks, Dick. Talk to you soon.
I love the interview today, and Julia's poem was a masterclass.
Yeah, she's great. I love a good villanelle, and that's timeless. That's a really good one.
Good.
Yeah,
take
care. Yep, bye.
Bye.
It was Dick Westheimer with on the occasion of the 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the perpetual anniversary of all the rest of the wars. Next up, let's go to Katie Dozier.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Hey, Katie. Good. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to hear Dick Westheimer is going to be on the Rattlecast. That was great.
I know. We kind of went back and forth whether or not to have it because it's a narrow topic book and he's got other books in the works. But we decided to do it because I think everybody's really curious to hear more about where Dick comes from. So what do you have that you'd like to share?
Okay. Well, I have the prompt poem this week, and I really like the prompt. I went a little crazy with the prompt. It's probably good you limited us to one this week because I have like 8. So hopefully I picked the best one of 8. I guess if I wrote 8 and they all are terrible, that's a really bad sign.
That would be a bad sign. But somehow I doubt that's the case.
Okay. All right. So this is called Enthrallment is an M dash. Here is a little bridge I build to you to walk along the cobblestones. Like fawns, some will wobble, yet an arm stretches out, so smooth as if my reach iron straight the lightning bolts. Every M dash is a flash, and look what I can hand you. A glass of water teetering on the far edge of your mind, metaphors balanced on the wingspan of a raven's time, staples on construction paper, uncoiled twine. Pluck this taut guitar string, slice this lime, blacker black fingernails, line dance back to home. How we grip this magician's wand, strike the unknown.
Yeah,
didn't quite slice that one line.
Well, that's okay. So tell me, what was it about the prompt that made 8 poems come about? Was it, what do you think it was that made it work for you? Because I'm always trying to figure out how to do better prompts.
I think anytime there's an excuse to Google and learn, I'm kind of a sucker for that. So I was Googling, I wrote a haiku sequence on obscure little grammatical marks and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if it works, but I sure had fun writing it.
Well, sounds good. I'm glad you did. Good to see you, Katie, as always, and hope you have another poem for us next week.
All right. Thanks for digging yourself out of the snow in order to do this awesome show tonight.
Oh, and I should say, too, we if you're on Zoom, we have the Poetry Space, which is a space on Zoom where it's like a collaborative conversation. Katie hosts it, but I'm there as the co-host every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So find either Timothy Green or Katie_Dozier on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Yeah. If you're only on Twitter, it's really fun, though, to have a conversation just with a whole bunch of people talking about poetry. It's a different format that's really cool.
It really is. I'd love for more people from the open lines in particular to get on there because I want to hear everybody's thoughts. And we're going to be talking about sonnets this upcoming week.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
sonnets. I'm really excited. And that was a sonnet I just read, too. So that was themed and I didn't even know it.
There you go. Perfect. Okay, good to see you, Katie. I'll see you on Thursday.
Bye.
Bye. It was Katie Dozier with Enthrallment is an M dash. Next, let's go to a first-time caller. We have Christy Gledhill here with us today.
Hi. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for that really great interview too with Abby. I was hoping. I live in Tacoma, so I miss her. I'm glad she's coming back. So this is actually a poem that I submitted for the Poets Respond a couple weeks ago, and it was in response to the MSU shooting at Michigan State University. And I happened to be home in Michigan during that week, and several nephews on campus and other people on campus. It was just it hit very close to home, and so this is what happened when I during that week that everything was kind of the turmoil around the shoot.
Yeah, it's tough to live through that and to have connections there for sure. And it just it comes, it just happens so often too.
Right.
That it comes close to home at some point inevitably. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps coming. So I'll read the poem, and there's an epigraph at the beginning. The title, An American Phenomenon, MSU number 67. The epigraph, mass shootings are, for the most part, an American phenomenon, and that's from Gun Violence Archive. When the shooting starts, when the calls pour in, when the cops fan out blue gunmetal gleam across campus, the scanner app the students download scares them shitless, reporting shots fired, reporting active shooter, multiple shooters, reporting OMG bombs on the loading dock, reporting death threats, reporting the smell of gunpowder in the courtyard, screaming in the cafeteria, reporting explosives in classrooms, reporting 3 dudes with guns in the quad, reporting The reports, the shots sending a voice major, someone everyone knew from her practice room, shot singing to emergency surgery. Her Michigan family notified. How were they notified? Who notified them? Did she? 9 softball players stacking furniture against the door, staying put. 1 shot sending a cousin's fraternity brother to his altogether unexpectedly violent pre-graduation death. 1 asthmatic classmate left on the lawn in the chaos, in the open, in the cold, gasping. 1 nephew in the dark in his room for hours against the wall, texting his friends, and his frantic mother hears cops in the hall, in the room next door, in his head, echoes of his own personal senior year school shooting initiation fresh, the language, the posture, the rules, the quiet waiting to be shot, not shot, the taste, the smell fresh now, so fresh, again. The flag's half-masted before the dead killer's note is found, before the body count is final. The basketball bleacher parents watching their high schoolers' games downstate all know someone who knows someone, a victim, a voice, some kid who'd survived the last school shooting only to turn around and survive this one too. A survivor, another survivor pin for your backpack, honey. So much surviving, so many of us, we get it now. We'll just keep surviving these darn things, these daily escapes from being shot, stabbed, bombed to death, no matter what. More survivors than victims, for sure, for sure. It's a low percentage, the ones actually shot, I mean, the ones legitimately wounded, those bleeding in a way that requires professional medical attention, sutures, transfusions. Your chances are actually pretty good. Your survival is likely. You'll survive and you'll get better at this, quicker, quieter. You'll be more prepared to shelter in place, much better equipped to decode the scanner chatter, tougher, more resilient, more skilled at whispering active shooter into your mother's ear.
Wow, yeah, powerful poem. And like the similar poem to Dick Westheimer's, great rhythm too on that. There's great cadence to it. Thanks for sharing that. Was it true somebody survived one shooting and then ended up at that shooting too?
Yeah, I think many kids on that campus did. Yeah, my nephew is one of them.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. It reminds me of The Last Train to Hiroshima, or From Hiroshima, that book about the person who survived in Hiroshima and then took the train to Nagasaki. It just heartbreaking to think of going through that twice and then a pin, you know. I can't help but notice on the back of your wall there, we have poems, I think, posted on the wall so everybody can see. That looks like the structuring a manuscript going, right?
It is. Yeah, it's actually 2 of them up there. So yes, thank you for noticing.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. It is definitely fun to have it done that way, having it so you can see everything all at once. Very cool. It's fun to see that in the background. Thanks for joining us. It's really a pleasure hearing your poems and meeting you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That was Christy Gledhill with An American Phenomenon, MSU number 67. Next, let's go to Janthi Rangan. Hey, Janthi. Oh, you're still muted. Let's see. I'll ask to unmute again. It's still muted. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, this is okay.
Perfect. Yeah, great to see you. So what do you have to share with us today?
Okay, this is a prompt poem. It's called Mother's Anxiety as a Correlative Conjunction.
And what's a correlative conjunction for all those non-editors out there who might not know what it is? I really don't. Correlative conjunction. I have no idea.
It's, when you have neither nor sort of
okay.
That pair, either or, those kinds of things. So it starts, Her brain broke into a sweat with angst. Her adult children didn't make the omelette well. Pushing them aside, she made a delicious brunch and repeated instructions, checking and rechecking. At times, of course, worry and tension. She argued random logic of a crashed mind. Pour coffee into milk and not the other way around. Her nerves rubbed off on anyone passing by, felt and seen by everyone. The correlative conjunction rubric was clear from afar. If the noun was singular, the verb was likewise, or a plural element used a plural verb. But up close, the proximity rules stuck to mom's kind of reasoning. The distance to the noun mattered. A sentence with a mixed bag of nouns added crystalline bizarreness. If mother's coffee making was confusing, grammar regulations were more so. Correlative conjunctions joined our words, and mom tied our bonds the same way. These terms came in pairs, like mother's love and ire. Whenever in doubt, we hugged her and nodded a big nod. Yes, Mom, pour coffee into milk and not milk into coffee.
That is great. Very touching poem. Mother's Anxiety is a correlative conjunction. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jayanthi.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Jayanthi Rangan with Mother's Anxiety as a correlative conjunction. Next up, we have Bishwajit Mishra.
Hi, Tim.
Hello, I see it's very dark where you are. Let's see the view. Or unless either that or you're in the Matrix.
Oh, see me. I'm trying out my new office. We just got the basement done.
Well, all we see are like green lines. So I think something, maybe is the cap on a camera maybe or something? I'm not sure.
Okay.
Oh, I think something else happened. Oh, there we go.
No, I'm turning back to my laptop.
Okay. Well, it's great now. So what do you have to share with us tonight?
Oh, I've got a prompt poem.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, let me empathize with you with all that snowfall you got. We got it just 2 days before you.
Oh, really? Where are you? Where you lived? I can't remember.
Calgary.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. It was a big storm. I mean, it was the best. It was the biggest storm here since 1989.
Yeah, I read that.
So all the neighbors, it was very communal though, because all the neighbors were out trying to shovel their driveway. We can like see each other and talk, but we can't even like get to each other. We're just like, hey, over there. And eventually, after much time, whoever had the shortest driveway won, and it was not me. So,
yeah. No, I was surprised when I read it that you guys are going to get like 3-4 feet of snow.
Yeah, it was 51 inches we got, and now there's another foot on the way tomorrow night too. So on top of the, and I think everybody's back is broken, and maybe we'll just give up and just wait till it melts. I think this time.
Maybe California is not a better alternative for us anymore.
Yeah. All right, so let's hear this poem. This is an article. Yeah. And why did you pick this?
I don't know. I'm equally surprised why this thing came about words like the. I don't know how it came. I was wondering what is the emotion in. So it just first couple of lines that came to me. Then I started. It's actually started with the Himalayas, to be honest.
Okay,
and I started. Okay, I remember from when we were in the school. So that's what the poem is. The is an article. Did I miss a piece from the definition? Well, I don't want to give it away right at the start. It'll kill the poem I'm going to write. Let's shred it apart to see what is its real texture. Is there an emotion that might have prompted a poem out of stew? I learned in school to say the Himalayas, and we wondered, were we not taught that proper nouns do not use articles? What would the kids know about stacking a name over others? Or could I use the before my name without failing the language class? Then when we grew, the list kept growing. A new motion was set in place of grading and the awe that comes with the for the graded, the exclusivity, the incomparability, the air lifting the skin, that rib cages struggle to match, and the heart is helpless to keep down, the attainment of the sheen, the halo of the Everest. It must be pretty cool on top, and the warmth of the article only deafening.
Oh, that's
I
excellent.
would also give the note, it seems the Everest is grammatically incorrect, or maybe it needs to gain a few more feet.
That's funny. I love the note. Thanks so much for sharing that, as always, Bishop.
Hey, Tim, there's one thing I wanted to tell you. I know we have a lot of callers today. I had sent a prompt poem to you last week. It's a very short poem, and I don't have to read it if you can sneak it anytime if you have time. It's a very short 1/4 page poem.
Let's just do it right now. Why not? Why don't you pull it up? Because if it is short, and
yeah, very short.
Yeah, let's do it.
It was actually the reason you know why I'm asking, because it was a response to a poem that came on Rattle. And I've never written something like that. It's a response to T.R. Hummer's poem Surge.
And the same format too, yeah. Which all of our proofreaders thought was a typo. They were like, I don't think this is supposed to look like this, Tim. And I was like, yeah, actually it does. His next book is going to be all shaped like this. So here we go. This is Cascade. Yeah.
Cascade. The surge came to me sitting on the bed, cascading chairless, blowing me away to the rocking chair by the window. The verses echoing back on the quietness of the late winter evening. Yet I could not figure out the direction. Is it not supposed to be down? But something seemed welling up and kept moving, slipping through the pores. Contagion may work both ways. Maybe the terrace will keep moving until it finds the poet on a return surge. I agreed.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, prompt poem to that surge by T.R. Hummer. Thanks for sharing that, Bishop.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Yeah, that was Cascade. Another poem that we missed last week, I guess. Let's go next to Guy Chambers is next.
Hello, how's it going?
Good, Guy. How you doing?
Not too bad. I see you getting all the snow down there instead of us up here. We don't mind. We don't mind sharing the snow every once in a while.
You can keep it for the rest of the year. And my little league starting, and my softball league starting, and we're not going to be able to play for like a month because this stuff is not going to melt. It's going to be on the field forever. Oh gosh, it takes me back to being in Western New York. It really does, and how much we treasured grass. So anyway, what do you have to share for us, Guy?
Yeah. And the worst thing is the wet snow, not a lot of floppy snow like we get. It's easy to shovel. That makes it nice that way.
Well, the nice thing is like chunks, and so you could just heave a huge 50-pound brick.
Yeah, but they're heavy.
They are, yeah.
Okay, this is a poem I sent here. It's not a prop poem, but this is out of my second book I got published. It's called Words from a Sinking Ship. Dread at sea. Once more. Years. Shadow offshore, exile veins, offhand, offset to the land, first hand to no man's land, foreign astray, unseemly, unfortunate, blind fate, tragedy, vessel lifeless, taken on water, weighing for the night beacon shining outward, the morning marker not seen in sight. Unyielding, still coldness, submerging water, relentless. Words from a sinking ship not have been acknowledged. Dreary grief, hard to believe. Stranded moment, silently domain, like a ghost. Hollow winds swirl around. Dead silent. Bleakness, betide, bewildered and strange. unparalleled feelings, hopelessness, numb stillness, demoralized, dispirit, unblessed, breathless, dreading, bitter, inmost, truth clearly, soon to be resigned to the deep unknown, to an unclaimed home. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, guy. I felt like you were reading that for me out there snowing.
Yeah,
shoveling the
I
snow,
thought about that.
all that numb silence.
Yeah, that's about it. I know what it's like, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, well, always a pleasure. Thanks, Guy. Good to see you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
There was Guy Chambers with Words from a Sinking Ship. A few more poets here. Mark Grenier is up next.
Hi, Tim. I've got, don't have a prompt poem, but listening to the interview today, it reminded me of my own childhood. This poem is called Military Brats.
Interesting. Let me, how many places did you stay? Did you live? Do you remember?
Oh, God, I don't know. A dozen, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. We moved every 2 or 3 years, it seemed. So, yeah. Anyway, this is called Military Brats. We called ourselves that with a sense of pride and difference. Our dads or moms, dutiful in uniforms, protected us all over the world, fighting the Cold War year after year, following orders from place to place, breaking the bonds between us and our friends, new friends we'd make at each new duty station, then leave too soon as orders changed and new assignments came to take us away from what we knew, from everything, everyone but our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, serving the national need for strength, the projection of power and presence, opposing the Reds, the communist threat against our homeland, our people, and all we loved, or so we were taught, at family meals, in schools and churches, by all the news that was fit to print or show on TV screens or in newsreel shorts, that defined our time as once again we became strangers, trying to find new friends. We abandoned each new world we knew for another new scene to learn and live within, despite our fears and isolation, finding new sources of strength, new knowledge to be gained from our new place, our fears and sense of pride and the isolation of families, living out front amid too few friends, too many newfound foes.
Oh, very interesting poem. Thanks for sharing that. Definitely appropriate for this week.
Okay, I thought it fit.
Yeah, definitely did. Thanks, Mark. That was great.
Okay, bye.
Bye. And yeah, Christy suggests submit it to Collateral, which is a good point. Let's go.
I will try to do that.
Yeah, we have a couple of people left. I think 3 left. Brian O'Sullivan is next.
Hello.
Hey, Brian. How you doing this week?
Good. Fun with the prompt.
Yeah. So what'd you come up with?
It's a poem called Hyphen.
Mm-hmm.
Hyphen. Death-themed improv? That's just asking for trouble, I thought, with a hand-scrawled Halloween-y flyer half buried on the Arts and Humanities building bulletin board between news of the write-a-thon and dance night trapped my bedraggled eyes. I stopped trudging towards my little office in the writing center, with Bonnie's cart coffee in hand, laptop bag strapped slipping down my arm, snow stuck to my caribou coat. I imagined improv Armageddon. Someone yells out heart attack to a committed actor who will never block, so the actor yes-ands with a room full of strokes. On the flyer, the hyphen, like dread, now loomed larger, a memento mori hooking death to life as theme to tragedy or any tale. I sipped my Lomi coffee and walked on, and I spent the rest of the day trying not to remember that life is a death-themed improv.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, good use of that metaphor, hyphen, Brian O'Sullivan. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yep, take care. Yeah, Brian O'Sullivan with hyphen. And Mary Lisa Dominicis. I have to say it faster, but I'm getting there. Hey, Mary Lisa, how you doing tonight?
Hi, how's it going?
Great.
It's De Dominicius.
De Dominicius. Okay.
There you go. You got it.
Okay.
Great.
I have to not think about it, though. It has to enter my muscle memory so I can Yeah. So what do
We
you
got
have
all
to
the
share?
time in the world. All the time. Yeah.
So what do you have for us tonight?
So I have a poem called Drawing an Equation. It was first published in my chapbook, Almost
cool.
All Read. It was nominated for a pushcart, but that was like a really long time ago. The thing I want to say about this poem is funny. It was written like 20 years ago. It's still in response to one of the prompts because it's a pivotal childhood moment. I've been writing down your prompts. So the big thing about this is in October, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I reread this poem and I was like, oh my gosh, my whole life now makes so much more sense. And this poem it's like in a nutshell, how did I not see it? So I'm going to shut up and read now.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. It's called Drawing an Equation. And so it begins in kindergarten when she tells us to color the grass in. After all day waiting a lifetime for my turn, sick to death of math and the repetitious calculation of goldfish units per set, drudgingly penciling 4, 4, 4 for how many perfect triangle pieces of pie inside the circle, the whole time trying to sit completely still and silent, listening for my name. This is when my name is called. Finally, something begins. Joy. I have permission to abandon the beige chair I cannot stand sitting down in. It's my turn to join them, to color the grass in, to draw on the brown paper whole class mural in a space reserved strictly for me and my version of landscape. I am 5, and I know things. I know things I don't know I know, and make the beige chair disappear. I show what exactly I see, and so when the crayon in my hand strikes paper, the paper so clearly becomes a field, I swear the mural disappears. The walls burst into blue air. The day is a color. The clock is a sun. It is summer, and I am under a huge weeping tree painting. I am pouring all of me into the grass. I am coloring in until the teacher, rushing in horror, plucks the giant green crayon from my hand, loudly with an ugh and an urgent shove to sit back down. I don't understand. What am I? Blind? I am unable to find the ruin I have created. I must be stupid to be so baffled about why there are no buts about it. But I must sit down right now to salvage the landscape. Someone with more sense must scribble quickly to cover my disaster, to have the mural hang on display. Each blade of grass must face in only one direction. From end to end, the grass must blend. Each patch must lie down on its side and pretend to sleep. And I must sit down without another word about it. I must put my head in my arms on the desk and allow and accept, then forget this moment. I put my head where my heart belongs for the sake of her art. I can't help but see red. If I breathe, I will cry. But I cannot cry, for if I do, it will be to insist on grass preservation, the manifestation of each individual's vision of what grass is. And I may not speak or cry or sing to defend my grass from its destruction. I must sit down without one passionate sound or opinion. I must sit down. I must put my head in the dark of my arms on the desk and draw my joy back in to wrestle the severe spirit of vengeance, wholly entering my half-asleep dream. I won't say what I see, but briefly infected, I sense something fierce and wicked and frightening inside me. And so, where one thing ends, another begins.
Oh, very interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mary Lisa. It's so fascinating the way that poems know more than we do, don't they? I mean, that's just how it works.
Way more. And you know what? I just remembered reading this. This is the one that Maria Mazziotti chose. It was a finalist. So, yeah. And you just had the reading. So, yeah.
Yeah, perfect tie-in. Okay. Yeah, Drawing an Equation. Yeah, and that's the Patterson Prize, which is what Maria just does so much. And that Patterson literary review, and she's from New Jersey, but then goes up to SUNY Binghamton, constantly to teach there and does so much in both communities. She's a great person. Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Great to read that poem.
Thank you for the time.
Yep, thanks, Mary Lisa. All right, and that was Drawing an Equation. Let's see. We have another first-time caller. There's actually two people left still. So Jane Puerto is next.
Yep, thanks, Mary Lisa.
Oh, are you there, Jane?
I'm here.
There you are. Hello.
Hello.
I think I hear myself in the background, so you're gonna have to mute or stop your other stream and just watch through Zoom.
I am on. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. I got your note after I submitted a poem about the news. And I had a chorus rehearsal tonight here in Columbus, Ohio. So I came in late, so I don't even know what this is all about. So I've been a poet for a long time, so maybe I'll come next week at 9:30 too.
Okay. Well,
I have the poem that I.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? Why don't you shut up home? This is the open lines at the end. So the show actually starts at 8 p.m., but there's open lines afterward. And let me find...
Okay, I submitted this poem. My name is Jane Puerto, and it's called No Catharsis Possible.
Great, and tell us what it's about as I pull it up. What was it?
It's about the Murdaugh trial.
Oh, I remember this because I've never heard about it. So explain for everybody who doesn't know what that trial is, because I had to look it up. It's not something I heard about.
You're kidding.
No, I don't. I only read the news when people write poems about them. So I don't watch TV.
Goodness. Well,
I don't really go to CNN or anything.
This is the case of the century, and
wow.
It is in South Carolina, and it's too much to tell. You watch Netflix?
Yeah.
Okay, well, they've got a new thing on Netflix about it, right? A 3 thing. He's accused of murdering his son and his wife. He's also a major thief. He's from a very prominent family. It's very much too much to tell. And I think you need to look it up because it's really pretty current when all 5 networks on Thursday do not broadcast any news at all, but stream the trial.
Wow.
That's a pretty big story, Timothy, and so I'm calling you out on it.
Okay. Well, I'll pay more attention to the news, I think. Okay. Let's hear this poem. No Catharsis Possible.
Right. This is a poem with 7 syllables per line. Even though we know what he's done, what he is accused of, the prosecutor's contempt for him made me feel sorry for him, having to endure this scorn on a public stand. Though car and phone data show his steps, his drives, his pauses, although he agrees that he is contemptible, guilty of theft, blatant malfeasance, the sound of his sobs, his throat clearings, apricot nimbus of hair, skin, ears, pink forehead, bushy brows, grimaces, tears, choruses, classic pity. I can see how victims trust forswore critical judgment with their sarcastic replays, condescending talking heads on Law and Crime, Court TV, Banfield, CNN, Abrams, MSNBC, YouTube, CNN, ABC, Mule. I mute, fear a suicide. How pill payments, opioids, paranoia, hate of sled, Spring's boat wreck with a girl dead, hired gun for a self-kill, parent dementia and death. How the shed, truck, labs, chickens, missing 300 blackout, golf cart, pawpaws, brains blasted, pellets in Maggie's face, breast, enact what Aristotle called our pity and our fear. How this is not theater, screen, poem, novel, no cleansing here, no purification.
Yeah, that was excellent. I remember reading that Friday night or Saturday morning and really wishing I'd followed the trial because it sounds really interesting, especially that witness stand thing. So thanks for sharing that. Very interesting.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and so if you want to share, that's Jane Pirto with a no catharsis
Pure at
possible.
your toe, pure toe.
Pure toe. And yeah, so we do this every Monday, and the open lines are always at the same time. So join us anytime you got a new poem to share.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, and we have one more caller left. Lucy Chow is here from China. Let's see if we can get Lucy on the line.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Lucy, how you doing today?
I'm doing right, and I hope I have changed to another device, and hope this time the connection would be better.
It sounds really good, actually, and you have 4 bars on your little Zoom thing, so it sounds great. Hopefully it'll work and you can stick with us the whole time, because your poems are wonderful. So what do you have for us this week?
Actually, I did a prompt poem, but I did not stick very strictly to the grammar term. Actually, I sent a poem called Passion as Pictogram, and pictogram is not technically a grammatical term, but it's a linguistic term. But it's interesting to see how this prompt about an emotion actually led me to write impersonal poem. It's interesting.
Yeah, that is.
And it has an epigraph from Emerson. Oh, I'll read it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Passion as pictogram. Words are signs of natural facts. Particular natural facts are symbols of particular spiritual facts. Nature is the symbol of spirit. Will that which we call a passion flower blossom as much flame by any other name? The passion, said the Spanish, can be read clearly, beautifully in this vine, pagan-born, but a Christian sign. Behold its symbols of spiritual facts, the holy lands of leaf tips, the tendrils, wicked whips. Witness Peter and Judas excluded from the 10 faithful apostles, its 10 petals and sepals, and those innumerable whirling rays, each crown of thorns, each flower suffering afresh that sad, sad hour, its ovary, small, still ripening womb, in the very shape of the Holy Grail, beneath 3 stigmas, 3 nails, nailing 5 anthers, Christ 5 wounds, 4 by the nails, 1 by the lance, part the blue of heavenly expanse. The exactness of the flower's own clock, each one blossoming 3 days, years of the ministry. Still our various readings, Rologia, Tokaiso, its blue the color of Krishna's aura, other than this one name, Passiflora. Pareidolia is God's image everywhere. His sacred heart in leaves of yam, each facade a pictogram of the pilgrims yearning passionately to translate the word, ever undeterred by myriad mazy meanings of the world, which the Ansephora hummingbird taps into with its sword, while the passion vine makes its own signs of fear, dark against the sky, wings of the heliconius butterfly, out of the holy lances and the slim whips swirling to grasp new territories with the zeal of missionaries.
Yeah, excellent, Lucy. Thanks so much for sharing that. Beautiful as always. I love that line, especially where was it, the exactness of the flower's own clock. Yeah, great stuff as always. That was Passion as Pictogram by Lucy Chow. And Lucy, the connection was great this time. So whoever you're doing it, like stick with this device and we'll be able to hear you every time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks. Have a good day.
Have a good night, Tom, Tim. Bye.
Bye. That was Lucy Chow with Passion as Pictogram. And that is it for the Zoom. Let's see if we have a few to read that are short. Let's see. Well, Nivedita, let's see. Can we get Nivedita's in? She sent a video. Try to put that. I'll download that, and then we'll take a look at another poet. Susan Talley has a haiku here. I'll just read Susan Talley's haiku, so I don't show her email address. But here it is. Haiku. This is Susan Talley. Pine trees in the breeze, whispers sifting through nettles. Ocean wave to the shore. Oh, very cool. Thanks. That was Susan Talley with a haiku. And Andrea Dobrica is here as well with a poem. And she says, if there's any time, my attempt at the prompt, the idea was to compare love to an apostrophe and its three uses: to indicate possession, to mark missing letters, digits in a contraction, and to mark plurals. I started with the concept in mind, but instead of love as an apostrophe, the poem compares a failed relationship to an apostrophe. So very interesting. And let me click the... There we go. I had a little tickle in my throat. Let me get a little sip too. So here's Andrea Dobrica's Defined by Omission. Here we go. Defined by omission. We did not intend to define love as an apostrophe, prone to possession, one's hunger of control, perfect overlap over another's abundance of survivors. Blinded by plurals, our own selves relinquished to melding embraces, we elevated this comma to proof of connection. Confounded contraction, we suddenly woke up into a haze of missing letters and intentions. I can't, we shouldn't. So we didn't. Love just marked us by omission. Ah, very cool. Defined by omission by Andrea Dobrica. Thanks for sharing that, Andrea. Let me see if we got Nivedita's poem now. Here is... No, that's not the right... Hang on a second. I downloaded it. Where did it go? Let me move this out of the way. Let me try again. 1 second. Where was I saving this? Download anyway. Oh, that's where I put it. Okay. I gotcha. I did not put it on my desktop like I intended. So here it is. No, that's not it either. Okay. We'll download it again. This is Happiness, by the way. And we'll get to it. Maybe I should... I'm just trying to think of the best way to do this. Maybe we'll just let... Maybe instead of do this, I'll just let Nivedita read it, because it's a short poem anyway. So let's just do it that way instead of waiting for it to download. Here's Nivedita. I'll get myself off the screen. And here's Nivedita reading her poem and talking today.
Hello, my name is Nivedita, and this is my attempt at the prompt poem for Rattlecast. So I've chosen to write mainly about the punctuation mark, colon, and the emotion I've chosen is happiness. So a little bit of grammar, let's just get that out of the way before we start the poem. So the colon. The colon has a variety of uses, some of which include introducing a list, introducing an explanation, introducing a quote, and connecting two related sentences. This is from thesaurus.com. I also end the poem with another punctuation mark, the parentheses, and I've equated that with the emotion sadness. So a little bit of grammar about the parentheses. Parentheses enclose information and separate it from the main idea of the sentence or paragraph. They should be used only when necessary. This is taken from EnglishGrammar101.com. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get on with the poem. Happiness is a colon. Happiness is joy, laughter, smiles. But pay attention to what follows. That is more important. That is what determines the quanta of happiness. Pay attention to what follows, the parentheses of sadness. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so once again, that was Nivedita Karthik with her prompt poem for this week, which was Happiness is a colon. Thanks so much for that. I think we might just play it that way. It's much easier than downloading and fiddling with the screens. We'll just let Nivedita share the poem that way. Let's see. Is there anyone else? There's a bunch of them. Let's see what time. I'll do a couple more. So here's J.B. Penname, the mysterious poet who does not want to be revealed. and is a surprisingly good poet, too. Hope is an oxymoron. So let's see JB pen name. Let's see what JB's got for us today. Hope is an oxymoron, but it is not a puffer fish, not a wormhole from Monday to Friday, or a river made of many smaller, growing and shrinking rivers, not hope bubbling up from the deep ocean like cola, or sitting by the office window intently watching the grass grow. Certainly not hope, the fish that remembers the day it learned to think like a fish, learned to breathe violence. Every fish inherits a history of violence, the bongos of a past life. Is that hope chewing on a plastic spoon and waiting for this war to end and the next war to end? Hope chanting, "Buy it," in the aisles of the Target as the body rejects itself? Hope wouldn't play board games and wonder how people came together before there were board games. There goes hope climbing over the war memorial at the elementary school, waiting for its parents to come pick it up. But it's not the sound of hope whirring as we turn the corner, just the wheels grinding. So another excellent poem by J.B. pen name, whoever you are. And I was talking to somebody about that, and they think J.B. pen name might be Billy Collins, but I don't know about that. Great poet though. Always good poems by J.B. Let's see. I think. Okay, so there's one more. There's a poem too, Dash the Poem by Kimberly McNeil. And so here goes this. She starts out with a photo. I think this is her, Kimberly, and her son. So let's take a peek at this photo first. And then here is Kimberly's poem. And they're, mother and son standing by a bridge in a black and white photo for those just watching or just listening at home, I should say. And here's the poem, Dash the Poem. My son died. I was devastated by the colossal waste that was his mind, that rare, non-judgmental, creative kind, free of stereotypes and completely blind to patriarchal rules, which he defined as the compulsions of those in power. Dash was unaffected by the normal things that make kids cry, a soaring visionary bravely asking why common sense would doubt his existence. I think that's a revision of a poem we did on Critique of the Week, if I remember right. I like this version. Thanks so much for sharing this. And she says, my son disappeared. His body was never identified. And the photo, we'll go back to that, was a photo of me and Dash, Burnside Bridge, Antietam, 2007, January 8th. And so that was Kimberly McNeil. Really touching, sad poem. Really well done too, Kimberly. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. And that is going to wrap up the show for today, I believe. Yes, it will. So, next week's prompt on the Rattlecast is going to be... Wait. I'm a little tired, sorry. The next, the Sciku. We have to do the Sciku. And I did. I screeched out a Sciku. The funny thing is, usually I write the Sciku in bed the night before. I read a little science article and then, think about it for a while. And then write the Sciku and fall asleep. And I remember it in the morning, which is always a surprise to me. But this morning I woke up and I could not remember the Sciku that I'd written before falling asleep last night. So I had to write a whole new Sciku, which is one of the reasons why I didn't have a prompt poem. But this is this article here, which, and now that they have, now that every website's built for smartphones, they have huge text. It's hard to get the whole thing in here. But you can see the picture anyway. This picture is from the James Webb Telescope. And this week, I think it made pretty major news that the Webb Telescope spots super old massive galaxies that shouldn't exist. And so what it is they looked at this dark space. Where was it by? Was it by the Big Dipper or something like that? They looked at this space that was pretty dark in the sky with the new amazing technology of the Webb Telescope. And they found these fuzzy little dots that were way brighter than they should be. And they were... only, because you can judge how old something is by the distance the light takes and the redshift and etc. Only 500 to 7 million years after the Big Bang, or more than 13 years ago from now. So that's how old these two galaxies are that they see in the Webb Telescope. And yet the galaxies are way too big and too massive to make sense with the standard model, which is the Lambda cold dark matter model, which I have my own theories, which I like to see that overturned because it's kind of fun. But anyway, that was my Sciku, or my science story, which inspired this haiku based on these galaxies that are actually much bigger than they should be for how old they are. They should be these like young little galaxies. But anyway, here's the Sciku. With each step, imperceptibly closer, distant light. With each step, imperceptibly closer, distant light. So that is the Sciku for today, and that is the show for today. Now, finally, it's time. I've been almost accidentally saying this prompt for like 3 times today. Next week's prompt is going to be this. Write a poem about a time you faced a moral dilemma. And so, of course, Abby Murray, the whole book is about being a pacifist. Hail and Farewell, which we talked about today with Abby, is about being a pacifist while married to a soldier. And so that's kind of a moral dilemma there. And so that inspired this prompt. Write about a time you faced a moral dilemma. That is the prompt for this week. Next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be James Davis May. James Davis, he's been a finalist for the Rattle Poetry Prize, just a brilliant writer. He had that poem right before Christmas about It's a Wonderful Life from Poets Respond, if you remember that. We published him several times. He has a new book out that's just getting rave reviews, Unusually Grand Ideas. And that's that beautiful cover there with the balloons too. That's James Davis May. He's been recommended as a guest for a long time, so it's cool to see him have a new book come out just now. That's going to be Rattlecast number 184. James Davis May, Monday, March 6th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.